Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very senior and accomplished corporate leader from Gurgaon, India, Mr. Ajai Puri. Ajay, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you.
Thank you. Ajay is the ex-chief operating officer of Bharti Airtel India and Southeast Asia. He has been the longest serving member of the Airtel Management Board, and he has served as the chairman of the Cellular Operators Association India during 2020 to 2022. So, Ajay, a few questions for you personally before we talk of telecom and governance. You have worked across FMCG, media, and telecom. What were some of the defining leadership lessons in your journey?
Yeah, Ashutosh. In fact, life is a constant learning, right? We need to keep learning and always be in the learning mode. That's my first biggest, message to the
Hmm.
audience. So I have been in the corporate world for over 4 decades, and I had a very humbling start.
Hmm.
And from there, life has been great, God's grace, been around. I moved to a management board position in the early age of 30, 35.
Hmm.
And then held a position of business head, CEO business head in a startup business from India for a large multinational.
Hmm.
And then I moved to telecom in my professional life, and I joined Bharti Airtel.
Hmm.
And during that phase also, launched the emerging business DTH
Hmm.
in India very successfully. And then I moved back to telecom, and I've been part of Airtel as CEO for India and Southeast Asia I
Hmm.
was for last 9, 10 years. Since I've retired, I have been on the board assignments, helping the startups as advisory and emerging businesses.
Hmm.
And I spent some time on my giving back to society objective through a
Hmm.
organization called SVP. And we'll talk about it maybe later. That's a
Certainly.
complete comprehensive chapter by
Certainly. And that,
itself.
that, that seems to be a pretty full bag of work that you keep doing even post-retirement. That's wonderful. But, during your working life, you've been known to build high-performing teams. What do you believe are the key ingredients of building leadership talent in emerging markets?
Yeah, I tell you, Ashutosh, I think it's linked to in a way to your first questions or first for the leadership qualities, and I would say quickly, I'll just capture saying, your basic attitude
Hmm.
and your grounding value system, which comes from your family background and early learning days, is extremely critical.
Hmm.
And that really helps you, being a positively inclined, caring leader, who is always there to help people and so on and so forth. I think the one thing apart that there is no substitute to hard work, sincerity, and commitment to the
Hmm.
cause. You should not be working for a 9 to 7 job or 9 to 9 job. You should be working like an entrepreneur in every role that you play.
Correct.
And I think from a people leadership perspective, you have to be extremely, I would call it selfless in a way and caring. And I think the other virtue which must be, displayed is one, while you're leading from the front, you've been demanding, you are comprehensively, task focused, but you also have the humility
Hmm.
and zero arrogance.
Hmm.
People work for leaders. They join organizations, but they work for all leaders. And they
Hmm.
also leave organizations because of the toxicity and, political environment that some
Hmm.
of the leaders display.
Hmm.
So I would say, keep things very simple for your teams. Do not pass the stress ever down. And, keep the environment extremely positive
Hmm.
while you're still driving the agenda.
Great
One
response.
more point,
Yeah.
Ashutosh, I would say is that I think in every situation, the leadership traits must change, or
Hmm.
your behaviors change.
Hmm.
You know, I worked for startups and I have worked for highly mature, large scale businesses,
Hmm.
so and so forth.
Hmm.
And when you work for a startup, I think your mindset has to be that of a startup mindset.
Correct. Correct.
Also, you know, in terms of self assessments and self entitlements. You know, I still remember when I launched the Cargill India food business and margins used to be extremely low, or when I went into DTH and started the new DTH business for Airtel. I put some disciplines around myself and said, okay, I'm not going to stay or travel as per my entitlements. I'm going to be extremely, you know, cost conscious, demonstrate the right behavior till we generate enough profits and get into a profitable, sustainable track record so as an
Hmm.
organization. So I
Hmm.
think these are some displayed behavior which teams
Hmm.
capture, even if you don't make a statement about it, and
Hmm.
then they try and emulate and follow.
Very well said. Thank you. And as someone who has led businesses in multiple countries, how do you adapt leadership to different cultures and operational contexts?
No, I tell you, it's a very basic understanding and appreciation of human needs,
Hmm.
and to some extent, cultural nuances. Every human being
Hmm.
has one need in common:
Hmm.
self-respect and being valued,
Hmm.
and that must be acknowledged and always lived by.
Hmm.
Yes, people in northern India could have a slightly different motivators and approach to life versus maybe in the south or down east. And same could be the difference between countries across. When I work for Bangladesh or Sri Lanka
Hmm.
or in my BAT days into Europe, there there are cultural differences and nuances.
Hmm.
As long as you are alive to their requirements and their sensitivities, I think it's an easy task. And
Hmm.
as I said, the principle should be you must be human in your approach, and you must be highly caring and value them and respect them for their what they are. Every individual is unique,
Yeah. Yeah.
and every individual brings lots of bag full of strengths and
Correct.
some areas of development.
Correct.
Sum
Correct.
total of that makes a great team,
Correct.
and I think
Absolutely.
that is what is important to understand and appreciate. If you
Absolutely.
start creating mirrors around you, then it is not a team, it's not an organization, it's an individual entrepreneur running a business alone by himself with all the mirrors around him,
Hmm.
and that is not a desired approach.
Very interesting. You've also been a very good mentor to many, many people in your life. What does mentorship mean to you? And how have you applied it to nurture future leaders?
Yeah, mentorship is key. It be it formal or informal
Hmm.
on the job itself. I personally believe people are watching you day in, day out as a leader.
Hmm.
And therefore you are mentoring, hundreds of thousands of people every time you interact with them without being formally being a mentor to them,
Hmm.
across the levels of the hierarchy and levels of the organization.
Hmm.
So it's your displayed behavior, I personally believe, which is the most important. Your human values, your displayed behavior, your sense of ownership, sense of entrepreneurial behavior, risk-taking ability.
Hmm.
I have a very kind of close to my heart concept called BHAG,
Hmm.
big, hairy, audacious
Hmm.
goals.
Hmm.
I mean, it's part of
Yeah.
some book, good to great book.
Hmm.
But I believed in it. You have to be always on the edge in life. You
Correct.
can't get to a situation of comfort. The moment you
Hmm.
feel that you're getting comfortable, too comfortable, you know, try and find some changes, try and do something differently, restructure the business,
Hmm.
re-energize
Hmm.
the various aspects of the business.
Hmm.
So if, and people will watch it. And the last one is the humility.
Hmm.
You have to be extremely humble.
Correct.
People should be able to speak out, even the 10 level down or 5 level down people who are you interacting with,
Hmm.
and they should be able to express themselves and not being feared by you. They should be
Hmm.
loving you. I
Absolutely.
mean, I personally also believe your displayed behavior on the way you state personal or self entitlements is a important one. I mean, just to quote you one, there are leaders in our organization at our level who are very sensitive about their entitlements. Okay, what
Correct.
kind of a car, what kind of a hotel, what kind of a
Hmm.
airlines, air seat, and so on and so forth. I wouldn't mind sitting on the back of a pillion of a sales representative or sales supervisor and work with him in the marketplace. And I
Hmm.
have done it the empty number of times,
Hmm.
and not because of anything else. One, I enjoyed doing this. Second, it had a message to the larger
Correct.
organization that I used
Correct.
to give.
Correct.
So I think these things really help, mentor people, and you don't have to have a formal mentoring and coaching classes for everybody and
Absolutely.
anybody.
No, no, very well said. Ajay, let's now talk about your new avatar as a role of a board member. And then maybe we'll talk a little bit about SVP. Uh, how has the role of independent directors evolved in India over the last few years?
You see, I think I personally think a lot of board members, the quality of the independent board members is constantly improving in India,
Mm.
right? And that's a result of professionals, people like you and me, coming into these roles and wanting to help the startup organizations, emerging businesses build sustainable growth kind of a philosophy.
Yeah.
I would only say that it also depends a lot on the founder and the entrepreneur,
Mm.
owner, to identify and go for truly independent board members and not create a board which does not have a voice.
Mm.
As long as that is adhered to, I think in boards really deliver
Mm.
good to the organization and the
Mm.
society.
Mm. And what, in your view, distinguishes a good board member from a great one?
I think the great board member is one who is not doing it for a single stakeholder
Mm.
or acting on the board for a single stakeholder.
Mm.
Particularly if the organization is moving towards a larger, mass-based, retail-based equity formats,
Mm.
then the board member has to make sure that he takes care of the larger stakeholder
Mm.
who do not have a voice. He takes care of the consumer who doesn't have a unified voice as much. As long as you take care of those two uh, you know audiences, I think you would do a good job. And the
Mm.
last one is that board member has to have a role to play in building a sustainable business model,
Correct. Correct.
right? And not just helping or handling quarterly results and just watching those performances, but to build,
Mm.
how do we build and structure a sustainable business model for the entrepreneurs who have the risk taking ability, who
Correct.
have the mind of an entrepreneur, but
Mm.
possibly do not have the experience of
Yeah.
of life to really help build that. And how do you guide them towards stakeholders or like consumers and the small retail investors and so on and so forth, larger base
Yeah.
for their goodness and their well-being.
Well said. But yet, Ajay, the fiduciary liability of a non-executive board member or an independent board member is now almost the same as that of an executive director. My question to you is, what are some of the key challenges boards face today in balancing shareholder interests with long-term sustainability and meeting the needs of independent directors?
Yeah, I think the good question. My own understanding is that the first two, which is balancing the shareholders, long tail shareholders' interest and be building a sustainable business model,
Hmm.
are on the both same side of the pyramid.
Correct.
They're not indifferent. So there is no conflict there. If you build a long-term sustainable business model, you're helping the cause for the tail investors.
Hmm.
May not be the large investors who have a very narrow, myopic view of a few years and so on and so forth. So that needs to be managed as a
Hmm.
board member. You need
Hmm.
to manage that. And the third point you said was that who was the third?
No, I say that how do boards manage the needs of independent board members, balancing shareholder interests and long-term sustainability?
I think there is no contradiction between them.
Hmm. Hmm.
They are the same
Hmm.
directionally.
Okay. How do board members, or how can board members contribute to shaping organizational culture and ethics? Because when someone like you with such a strong professional background comes into a startup entrepreneur board, you can contribute hugely to build
Yes.
culture.
Yes, yes, I completely agree. And again, I think here your personal experience and your personally leading the that a part of the aspect job, I
Hmm.
think helps a bit,
Hmm.
helps a lot. You have to build the processes and you know structures and everything accordingly, and make sure that the people and the employees and the culture is built around it.
Hmm.
I think the independent board members should not restrict them only to the board meetings, give with the obviously consent of the owners and individuals, but
Hmm.
they should also, I mean, I personally make do what I do is I do not only restrict to board meeting, but I also interact with some of the executives of the management board. I do visit the locations once or twice,
Hmm.
just to get a sense of culture and how the people's morals are, and how they engaged and excited they are about. Are they fully aware of what organization is wanting to do, why organization is doing what organization is doing? So I think the role I mean, like any other operational role, my understanding is even in this role you should take little greater than the stated role as an independent board member,
Hmm.
and help build the culture of the organization, help build people morale, help build the right people processes, and all those I think should be part of your
Hmm.
stated, unstated responsibility as an independent
Well
board
said.
member.
Well said. But before you decide to accept a position as an independent board member in a company, how do you evaluate the effectiveness of a board beyond just compliance and quarterly results?
Yeah, I think a bit of due diligence for sure.
Hmm.
But more importantly, in my approach, is the company really going for a transformation and change? If the company is on a treadmill running, for a 6% annualized growth, no major work, I'm not very excited. I'll join the board, but
Yeah.
I'm not very excited about it.
Yeah.
I'm excited if the company is at the threshold of a transformation, companies
Hmm.
at a threshold of a huge growth.
Hmm.
That is what excites me. Company has a huge challenge of top line being heavy, but the margins being very low,
Hmm.
not profitable. How do you convert, create a sustainable, profitable model?
Hmm.
I would be very excited to join. So that's why I qualify that I want to work with, I work, I select the emerging enterprises or the enterprises which are struggling,
Hmm.
and so that I can help contribute to the change of trajectory.
Hmm.
So that's my one criteria. But yeah, I mean, little bit of due diligence, understanding whether the owners and the founders are receptive of the
Hmm.
value systems and the changes that you want to bring. So have those discussions before you do
Well
a board
said.
selection.
Well said. So I had a choice of discussing my next set of questions, whether to talk of Telecom India or SVP, but we were talking about SVP before we started recording our conversation, and you're closely involved with SVP. So let me ask you, tell me a little bit more about SVP and how you are associated with, and what are the kind of work being done there.
Yeah, in fact, after 40 years or 4 decades of my corporate role, where I've given in one way to the society back, in one way. I was very clear that I do not want to continue on that trajectory in that same fashion, but I would rather do multiple organizations, help them build a sustainable business model, and or also give back to society a little bit. In
Hmm.
fact, I was quite keen to join the government, some organization, government of India organizations,
Hmm.
for whatever reason. It hasn't yet matured, but I was in deep discussions with Niti Ayogs and all that. So how do I give back to
Hmm.
society?
Hmm.
And in that context, SVP came out as a very a good illustration. SVP is a US organization. It has a philosophy of engaged philanthropy. When I say engaged, it does not mean that you only financially support somebody, but you
Hmm.
also give your time, your guidance, your mentorship. You almost own specific NGOs. In India, we have a 7 chapters. It's a US-based organization, as I said, multiple countries. India, 7 chapters. In Delhi, Delhi is one of the chapter, and we as partners not only commit to contribute financially and to some extent, whatever extent we feel like there is some
Mm,
minimum amount, but we also commit to support some of the NGOs and personally mentor them, guide them, take them to next level of their emergence. And
mm,
we normally select NGOs which are in the early stage of their growth and development,
mm.
and we help on a sustained basis for a period of 3 years,
Right.
and then we hand them over back to the larger ecosystem. During that phase, we do every kind of capacity building, mentorship, guidance, rewriting if need be their strategic objective, their charter, and the whole value system.
Mm,
I personally today mentor 2 NGOs in that sphere, and it's an amazingly fulfilling
mm,
job.
mm,
You whether I give 3 days or 4 days in a month, but those are extremely enriching and fulfilling. So I think I
mm,
feel little happy that there is some bit of giving back to society. I mean,
mm.
I don't. My guilt is not as Although I believe in corporate world also, you are giving back to society by creating machinery organizations like Airtel. I mean, which is almost like biggest infrastructure category that you have in the country
Correct.
and the world.
Correct.
Data highways and data capacities are fueling the India's growth, India's
Mm.
GDP. They are fueling health, education, industry, the works, the
Yeah,
whole world.
absolutely.
So I personally believe when we built Airtel, we did not build Airtel only for our board and for our
Mm,
stakeholders. We built
mm.
Airtel for the largest good of the society and India.
Correct.
So it's been an emerging, amazing journey as well. you
Mm,
know, Building Airtel from early days of licenses when we got into various circles, units to almost 12, 10, $12 billion Indian turnover operator, almost like 40 share of the market, having gone through multiple battles.
correct.
You know
Correct.
that how
Yeah,
the telecom has
absolutely.
gone through, but Airtel has survived and sustained over the last
Mm,
30 years and survived and sustained with a lot of glory, lot
absolutely.
of consumer love,
Mm,
and that's what we built. We said
fantastic.
we don't want consumer for a limited period. We want consumers for life.
Mm,
And what will it take to build consumers for life and to become most lovable brand in Indian consuming markets? So
absolutely.
that's what we've done there also.
Absolutely. And on that note, I'm just going to say, Ajay, this has been such a fascinating conversation. We were able to cover different aspects of your journey. You gave us some amazing lessons on your journey and how you have mentored so many people and some of your own philosophies, including, making sure that you fit in with whatever is the organization that you're in and look at every role as a startup. Uh, Thank you also for speaking to me about your perspectives on role of board members in governance. And finally, thank you for speaking to me about SVP. I'm sure a lot of my viewers and listeners may be interested in looking a little more at SVP and see how they could get associated. Thank
I'll
you
be
again.
delighted if I
Yeah,
can get few more colleagues and friends joining SVP one way or the other, helping SVP. I'll be delighted because it's
thank
for
you.
a very noble cause, very good
Absolutely.
cause.
So thank you for speaking to me, Ajay, and all the very best to you.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Thank you very much. God
Thank you.
bless you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.